Did China just destroy the Western world without firing a single shot? All they had to do was make one law in their own country. It was so simple that everyone missed its relevance. But what's coming is almost completely our fault. I can't prove that they did it intentionally. But I will show you the evidence, step by step, so you can see for yourself why the West, and every nation that depends on the Western economic system, is facing an imminent collapse that almost no one has seen coming. It will happen within months, not years. And we handed it to them on a silver platter. My name is Richard Haight. I'm an author living on a small piece of land in rural Oregon. I spent 15 years living in Japan, where I trained in the classical art of strategy. That training gave me a way of seeing what others tend to miss. Surely you already know something is wrong. You might be unable to name it. You might not have the data or the precise vocabulary for it, but you feel it. You feel it when you go to the grocery store and the prices don't make sense anymore. You feel it when you read the headlines about banks and bailouts and gold suddenly hitting record highs and you think, what is actually happening? You feel it when someone tells you the economy is strong and your gut says, that's not true. But you don't know exactly why your gut is saying that. I'm going to give you the why. Let's start with silver. What I'm about to share with you is going to sound extreme. I know that. I know how these videos usually go. Someone tells you the sky is falling, tries to sell you something, and then nothing happens. I'm not selling anything. I followed a thread of publicly available data further than most economists have, and what I found at the end of that thread immediately concerns your life. That's why I'm making this video. No matter what transpires, you're going to walk away from this video with something that is genuinely valuable. That's my promise to you. You're going to see a pattern, a way of thinking about problems that will serve you for the rest of your life. You're going to see how every crisis, every failure, every betrayal of public trust follows the same root cause. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that seeing will make you stronger regardless of whatever else happens. Let's start with a simple idea. Everything in your daily life, the food on the shelf, the gas in the tank, the electricity in the wall, the phone in your hand, all of it runs on a system of promises. I give you a piece of paper, $1 for example. You give me something real, like your labor or some eggs. That paper is a promise. The whole economy is a web of promises. This system works beautifully, as long as there's enough real stuff to back up the promises. What happens when there isn't? In late January of this year, silver hit $121 an ounce. If you don't follow commodities, that number might not mean much to you. But a year before that, silver was around $30. It had quadrupled in 12 months. And then, on January 30th, it crashed. In a single day, it dropped from $121 an ounce to $75. A 38% collapse, just like that. That spike caught my attention because it felt so unnatural. Something that quadruples in price based on real demand and then suddenly drops 38% in a day is not a market correcting. It had the signature of someone intervening. So I started asking, what is silver? Why did it spike? And who benefits from crashing the price? Let me answer the first question. Because most people only think of silver as jewelry or old coins. It's much more than that. Silver is an industrial metal. It's in every solar panel. It's in every smartphone. It's in every electric vehicle. It is in medical devices, AI chips, 5G infrastructure, batteries, and satellites. Silver has the highest electrical conductivity of any element on Earth. There is no substitute for it in most of these applications at any price that makes economic sense. When Apple builds an iPhone, they need silver. When Tesla builds a car, they need silver. When a solar company builds a panel, they need actual silver atoms, not a paper contract promising silver. Now here's the problem. The world uses about 1.9 1.16 billion ounces of silver every year, but the world only mines about 820 million ounces a year. Think about that for a moment. Every year, on average, humanity uses 340 million more ounces than it digs out of the ground. And this has been going on for 5 consecutive years. The cumulative structural deficit since 2021 has now reached nearly 820 million ounces, effectively erasing a full year of global mine production from available stockpiles. This brings us to a place most people have never heard of, but that controls the price of silver for most of the world. It's called the COMEX, the Commodity Exchange. It's run by the CME Group in Chicago. Think of it as a giant warehouse with a trading floor attached. People buy and sell contracts that represent silver stored in the COMEX vaults. One contract equals 5,000 ounces. For decades, the system has worked because most people who buy these contracts never actually take the silver out. They trade the paper back and forth, and the silver just sits there. But what happens when people start actually asking for the silver? What happens when manufacturers need it for their factories and they show up at the warehouse and say, "Give me what I paid for"? That's what's happening right now. As of February 11th, the COMEX reported that its deliverable silver, what they call registered inventory, fell below 100 million ounces. On that single day, over 3.2 million ounces were withdrawn. The vaults are draining at a rate of roughly 785,000 ounces every day. But here's the number that's most important. The contracts outstanding against that silver, the promises that have been made, total over 400 million ounces for the month of March alone. 4 times more silver has been promised than exists in the vault. In February, a minor delivery month, 98% of open contracts stood for physical delivery. 18.7 million ounces demanded out of 19.1 million ounces in open interest. That's a bank run. In January, deliveries hit 49 million ounces, 7 times the 2024 level. People aren't trading paper anymore. They're taking the metal and walking away. And March is 20 times larger than February. You don't need a finance degree to understand this. If you promise 4 people the same car and only 1 car exists, 3 of those people aren't getting a car. It doesn't matter how clever you are with paperwork. There's 1 car. And there's no way to make more cars appear in time. New silver mines take 8 to 12 years to develop. Global mine pipelines, even if every project hit 0 delays, couldn't close this gap before 2030 at the earliest. And the demand is rapidly accelerating because solar and AI and electric vehicles are growing, not shrinking. So when silver spiked to $121 in January, that was the market beginning to figure out that the promises can't be kept. And when it crashed to $75 the next day, that was the people who made those promises using every tool they had to buy themselves a little more time. Let me show you what those tools are and why none of them work when the problem isn't money, but atoms. If 4 people have been promised the same car, and there's only 1 car, what do the people who made those promises do? They have a playbook. Every tool in that playbook has the same purpose: to keep you from noticing that your car doesn't exist. Let's walk through them one by one. The first tool is called a margin hike. Here's how it works. To hold a silver contract on the COMEX, you have to put up a deposit, like a down payment. The exchange can raise that deposit whenever they want. On January 29th, as silver was hitting 121, the CME raised margin requirements from 9% to 15% in a matter of days. That means anyone holding a contract suddenly needed to come up with 60% more cash just to keep their position open. If you can't come up with the money by the next morning, your position is liquidated, sold out from under you automatically. Who does that hurt? Not JP Morgan, not Goldman Sachs. They have functionally unlimited access to cash, including, as we'll see, emergency lending from the Federal Reserve. A margin hike is an inconvenience to them. But smaller investors, the manufacturers hedging their supply, or a fund that's leveraged, they're forced to sell, which crashes the price. That gives the big players a chance to buy at a massive discount. That's exactly what happened on January 30th. The margin hike triggered a cascade of forced selling. Silver dropped from $121 to $75 in a single day. And at the bottom, JP Morgan stood for delivery of 3.1 million ounces as the price collapsed to $75. Notice how this was reported. On January 30th, the same day silver crashed 38%, President Trump nominated Kevin Warsh, a well-known hawk, as the next Federal Reserve Chair. The dollar spiked, and every headline said the same thing. Silver plunges as hawkish Fed pick strengthens dollar. Sounds reasonable, except gold only dropped 8% on the same news. Same dollar spike, same Fed chair, same headlines. But silver fell 4 times harder than gold. If this were about the dollar, they'd move together. They didn't. The difference is the 60% margin hike the exchange imposed in the days before the crash. The hikes that were already forcing smaller players to liquidate. The Warsh nomination didn't cause a 38% crash in silver. It provided a convenient explanation. That's how it works. The mechanism is hidden. The narrative is clean. And unless you look at both metals side by side and ask why one fell 4 times harder than the other, you'd never notice. Now, does a margin hike create any silver? Does it put a single ounce into the vault? No. It just changes who's holding the contracts. The car doesn't yet exist. You've just changed who's standing in line for it. And the people standing in line now, the ones who survived the margin hike, they're the ones with the deepest pockets and the strongest reasons to demand actual delivery. The second tool is cash settlement. Instead of delivering your car, I write you a check. Maybe I even write you a check for a little more than the car is worth. You get paid. I don't have to produce a car. Problem solved, right? Here's why it doesn't work. Some contract holders take the cash. Financial speculators who never needed the physical silver in the first place, they're happy to take a premium and walk away. But Apple can't solder cash onto a circuit board. Samsung can't build a semiconductor with a check. A solar panel manufacturer can't substitute a wire transfer for the silver they need on their production line Monday morning. The entities driving the current demand are industrial users who need physical silver to keep their businesses running. They don't want money. They need atoms. And the moment the exchange says, "We'll pay you cash because we can't deliver the metal," that is the moment every remaining participant knows the silver isn't there. And every rational actor who needs the metal responds the same way. They demand delivery even harder. The cash settlement doesn't solve the problem. It advertises it. The third tool is rule changes. The exchange can legally extend delivery windows, refine what counts as deliverable silver, and change the terms of contract. There's a precedent. In 2022, the London Metal Exchange faced a similar crisis in nickel. Prices spiked so fast that some major players faced enormous losses. The LME response was to halt trading and cancel billions of dollars in completed trades, retroactively changing the rules to protect the exchange. The exchange survived, but nobody trusted it after that. Trading volumes collapsed. Major participants left. The message was clear. When the rules stop protecting you and start protecting the house, the game is over. Rule changes by days at the expense of permanent credibility loss. Now here's the critical thing to notice. Every one of these tools was created by someone solving their own problem while ignoring everyone else's. The margin hike protects the exchange, not the manufacturers who need silver. Cash settlements protect the banks who sold contracts they can't fill. Rule changes protect the institution, not the market participants who trusted it. Each one is a rational decision from the perspective of the person making it, and each one makes the underlying problem worse for everyone else. This pattern matters. Remember it. We're going to see it again. The fourth tool is the big one. the one that has bailed out every financial crisis in living memory: money printing. The Federal Reserve can create dollars out of thin air, and they do. In 2008, they created trillions to cover the banks. During COVID, trillions more. It has always worked. Until now. On December 31st, 2025, banks borrowed $74.6 billion from the Federal Reserve's emergency lending window. This was a record, 50% higher than any previous day on New Year's Eve, when financial markets are supposed to be quiet. Then, on January 26th, the Fed injected another $17 billion. Then, in early February, $34 billion more, after quietly lifting the caps on how much banks could borrow. The Fed can do this because the Fed creates dollars. But can the Fed create silver? No. And that's the problem. If a bank owes silver it doesn't have, and the price is rising, that bank is losing money every day. The Fed can lend them dollars to cover their losses, but lending money to finance a loss doesn't make the loss go away. It just means the loss is being funded with newly created dollars. These new dollars dilute every existing dollar. That's inflation. And inflation pushes commodity prices higher, which means the loss gets bigger, which means the Fed has to print more, which pushes prices higher still. It's a feedback loop with no off switch. Printing money to solve a commodity crisis is like pouring gasoline on a fire thinking it's water. Every tool in the playbook manages the perception of the crisis. None of them address the reality. More silver has been promised than exists. You cannot create silver with a margin hike. You cannot create silver with a cash settlement. You cannot create silver by changing the rules, and you cannot create silver by printing money. You can't print atoms. You might be thinking, okay, the silver market has a problem. But that's the silver market. What does that have to do with me? I don't trade commodities. I don't own silver contracts. Why should I care if some exchange in Chicago can't deliver metal? Because the silver market isn't a standalone system. It's connected to everything. And the mechanism that connects it is something most people have never heard of, but that controls the fate of every bank, every retirement account, and every dollar in your wallet. The mechanism is called derivatives. And despite the complicated name, the concept is simple. A derivative is a bet. It's a contract between two parties where one side bets something will go up, and the other side bets it will go down. The loser pays the winner. Banks make these bets with each other constantly, on interest rates, currencies, commodity prices, and thousands of other things. Each bet is a contract. Each contract is a connection between two institutions. And the total value of these bets currently outstanding in the global financial system is over $846 trillion as of June 2025. Let's put that number in perspective. The entire U.S. economy, everything America produces in a year, is about $28 trillion. The global economy is about $100 trillion. The derivatives market is more than 8 times the entire global economy. It is a web of bets so large that no one fully understands all the connections, not the banks, not the regulators, not the Federal Reserve. Now, most of the time this doesn't matter. The bets mostly cancel each other out. Bank A bets silver goes up. Bank B bets silver goes down. One wins, one loses. The money moves from one to the other. Life goes on. The system works as long as the losers can pay. But what happens when the losers can't pay? That brings us back to the silver market. A bank sold a contract promising to deliver silver at $75 an ounce. Silver is now trading above that in the physical market. Every ounce they owe costs more than they were paid for it. That's a loss. Now multiply that by millions of ounces across dozens of institutions. They are positions worth billions of dollars, and the losses are growing every day that the silver shortage continues. If a bank takes losses large enough that it can't meet its obligations, it defaults on its bets with other banks. Those other banks were counting on that money to cover their own bets. Now they're short. Now they might default too. One failure triggers the next, a chain reaction moving through that $846 trillion web at the speed of a phone call. This is what happened in 2008, but with mortgages. Banks had made bets on mortgage-backed securities. When the housing market collapsed, the losers couldn't pay. The failure spread from bank to bank until the entire global financial system nearly went down. Governments spent trillions bailing it out. This time is comparatively worse. In 2008, nobody knew exactly what the mortgage-backed securities were worth. Maybe the housing market would recover. That ambiguity gave governments time to step in, guarantee the assets, and wait. It took years, but it worked. Partially because the problem was made of paper, and paper can be restructured and renegotiated. Silver can't be renegotiated. An ounce of silver has a visible market price. A short position has a calculable loss, and the fact that more silver is consumed than mined every year, with no new supply coming for years, means the price has constant upward pressure. In 2008, banks could wait and hope. Here, there's nothing to wait for. The shortage is getting worse, not better. Every day that passes, the gap between what was promised and what it costs grows wider. And here's the thing that most analysts are missing. Silver isn't the only commodity where promises have outrun reality. It's just the one where the math is most visible right now. Copper has a 1 million ton deficit. Platinum has been in structural shortage for 7 of the last 11 years. Uranium supplies are so tight that Western power plants have almost no buffer left. Yes, commodity shortages happen. They've happened before, and the world didn't end. So why is this time different? Because of what's sitting on top of them. Remember that 840 trillion web of bets we just talked about? Those bets don't just cover silver. They cover copper, platinum, oil, natural gas, uranium, every commodity that keeps the modern world running. And most of those bets were priced on the assumption that these metals would remain cheap and available. That assumption was based on paper prices that were artificially suppressed for over a decade. Low prices discouraged investment in new mines because there wasn't enough profit margin. But now the world needs these metals for AI, solar panels, electric vehicles, and semiconductors, and the mines simply don't exist. The shortage by itself is a problem. A shortage underneath trillions of dollars in bets that assume the shortage was impossible, that's a detonator. If the markets were cheating in silver, they were cheating everywhere else they could. Silver is just the fuse. The bomb is the entire commodity complex and the 8.6 trillion web of bets sitting on top of it. You may be wondering, where were the regulators? Who was supposed to be auditing these vaults and making sure the metal was actually there? That's the pattern again. The regulators were looking out for themselves. The exchanges self-report their inventory numbers. The banks mark their own positions. The agencies responsible for oversight are staffed by people who come from the same institutions they're supposed to be watching, and who plan to return to them. Nobody had an incentive to look too closely, because what they might find would be everyone's problem. So nobody looked. It's the same disease: individual rationality, collective blindness. So how do we know this isn't just another doom theory? Something that could happen someday, but probably won't anytime soon? Because we can watch. We can see. There are specific observable signals that tell us when the system is moving from stress to breaking. I identified 8 of them. Think of them as warning lights on a dashboard. Once you see them, you'll understand why I made this video. Signal 1. COMEX inventory drain. If the system is healthy, the vaults hold steady or grow. If the vaults are draining, it means more people are taking metal out than putting it in. The promises are being called. Status. The vaults have been draining for months. They fell below 100 million ounces on February 11th. Red light. Signal 2. Margin hikes. If the exchange starts raising margin requirements aggressively, it means they're trying to shake people out of their positions to reduce the number of people who might ask for delivery. Status. The CME raised margins 60% in late January. Red light. Signal 3. Shanghai Premium. Silver trades in Shanghai too, on a separate exchange. If the Shanghai price rises significantly above the Western price, it means the physical market and the paper market are diverging. The paper price is no longer reflecting reality. Status: Shanghai is pricing silver $10 to $30 above the COMEX price. The gap is the largest ever recorded. Flashing red light. Signal 4. Treasury auction weakness. The U.S. government funds itself by selling treasury bonds. If major foreign buyers start pulling back, it means confidence in the dollar is eroding. Status: China, India, and Brazil have collectively sold over $183 billion in U.S. treasuries over the past 12 months. China alone sold over $71 billion. The dollar's share of global reserves has dropped from 65% to 58%. Red light. Signal 5. Gold breaking out. Gold is the ultimate safe haven, the asset people flee to when they lose confidence in the financial system. But to see what's really happening, we need to look beyond just the price. We need to look at what the banks are doing. In October 2025, COMEX processed a record 58,000 gold delivery contracts. That's physical gold leaving the vault. In December, another 37,000 contracts, 3.7 million ounces. Wells Fargo took 42,900 ounces in a single day. Morgan Stanley took 44,000 ounces. HSBC took 10,200 ounces. For decades, less than 1% of gold contracts resulted in physical delivery. That number is now approaching 7%. The banks are pulling gold out of the system and putting it in their own vaults. If the people who run the financial system are quietly hoarding physical gold, what do they know that they aren't telling you? Gold has just broken 5,000 an ounce for the first time in history. Red light. Signal 6. Physical dealer stockouts. If you can't buy silver from a retail dealer, it means physical supply has been completely absorbed. Status: By early February, widespread stockouts were reported across major dealers. Red light. Signal 7. Emergency Fed action. If the Federal Reserve starts lending at unusual volumes or removing limits on lending, it means banks are in trouble they can't solve on their own. Status: Record borrowing December 31st. Lending caps quietly lifted. $34 billion injected in early February. Red light. Signal 8. Bank credit default swaps spiking. This is the most technical one, but it's simple in concept. A credit default swap is insurance against a bank failing. If the price of that insurance suddenly spikes, it means the market believes bank failures are becoming more likely. Status: Not yet fully read, but the emergency Fed lending suggests the stress is there. This light is flickering. 7 of 8 warning lights are on. The 8th is flickering. The vaults are draining. The prices are diverging. The Fed is lending at emergency levels. Gold has broken records. Foreign governments are dumping dollars. Dealers can't keep silver in stock. 7 of the 8 observable signals that the system is under critical stress have already triggered. So what happens when the 8th light turns on? What happens when a major bank's losses become visible enough that the market prices in the possibility of failure? That's where this story stops being about silver and starts being about you. So let's talk about you, your daily life, the things you don't think about because they just work. Tomorrow morning, you're going to wake up and flip on the light switch. Electricity will flow. You'll open a faucet and water will come out. You'll drive to a grocery store and the shelves will be full. You'll swipe a card and the payment will go through. You might stop for gas on the way home and the pump will work. None of this feels fragile because none of this has ever failed. Not all at once. Not for any sustained period. Not in your lifetime. But every one of those things, every single one, depends on a chain of payments happening behind the scenes. Take the grocery store. The food on that shelf didn't appear by magic. A farmer grew it. A processor packaged it. A trucking company hauled it. A distributor housed it. The store ordered it, stocked it, and refrigerated it. Every link in that chain is a separate business. And every one of those businesses did its part because it expected to be paid on schedule, in dollars that would be accepted by the next person in the chain. Now imagine the banking system seizing up, the way it almost did in 2008. Banks stop trusting each other. Payments stall. Your credit card declines at the bodega downstairs. Not because you're out of money, but because the system that verifies your account can't reach your bank. The ATM says temporarily unavailable. The trucker's fuel card declines too. The distributor's wire transfer to the farmer doesn't clear. The grocery store's automatic reorder system fails because their line of credit has been suspended while their bank figures out its own exposure. The farm has food. The trucks still run. The warehouse is full. But the payment system that coordinates all of them has stopped functioning. And without that coordination, the food doesn't get delivered. The system doesn't have to be destroyed to stop working. It just has to be interrupted. And modern supply chains have almost no tolerance for interruption because they were designed for efficiency, not resilience. You've probably heard the phrase just-in-time economy. It's how every major supply chain in the developed world operates. Grocery stores don't keep weeks of inventory in stock. They keep days, sometimes less. The food on the shelf today was in a truck yesterday and at a warehouse the day before that. The whole system is optimized to minimize storage costs by keeping everything moving at exactly the speed it's consumed, which works beautifully until the movement stops. A major grocery chain typically has about 3 days of inventory on its shelves. Within 3 hours of a crisis, those shelves are empty. I know this because I watched it happen. On March 11, 2011, I was working at a middle school in Kanagawa, Japan. It was graduation day. The ceremony had just ended. I was heading back to the teacher's room when the building started shaking and shaking and shaking. The train stopped. It was a bitterly cold, windy afternoon. Kids called their parents to come pick them up, but the roads, every road, were gridlocked. The cars became so useless that people abandoned them and just started walking. I remember standing there watching hordes of people in the dark, in the cold, just walking, trying to get home to check on their families. We had a lot of kids who couldn't get home that night, or the next few days. We teachers made runs to the local stores to get food for them. Within 3 hours of the earthquake, the shelves were completely empty. No food, no water, no toilet paper, no lighters, nothing. 3 hours. And Japan is one of the most disaster-prepared nations on Earth. They drill for earthquakes in schools. They plan for this at every level of government. But here's the thing that mattered most. Everyone knew it was temporary. The earthquake had a boundary. It hit one region. The rest of Japan was fine. The rest of the world was ready to help. Power would be restored. Trains would run again. People were scared, but they knew the disruption had an endpoint. And the shelves still emptied in 3 hours. Now ask yourself, what happens when the disruption isn't an earthquake in one region, but a financial system failure with no geographic boundary? When there's no unaffected region ready to resupply, because every region runs on the same system that just broke, and when people sense, even if they can't articulate it, that this time nobody's coming to fix it, the food vanishes in one day, and it doesn't come back. Let me show you why it doesn't come back. This happens in 2 phases, and most people only know about the first one. Phase 1 is the freeze. The crisis cascades faster than the rescue can arrive. Banks stop trusting each other. Payments stall. Credit cards decline. This is hours to days. During those days, businesses that depend on daily credit, which is nearly all of them, can't operate. Imagine you live in a high-rise apartment in a city like Manhattan or Chicago. The grocery store is emptied on day 1, but the power still works, for now, because the power company has fuel in reserve. The lights are on, the water runs. You ration what food you have, and you wait, because the government keeps saying it's under control. Then the rescue arrives. The Federal Reserve prints money. The banks technically survive. Payments technically resume. You exhale. But now the second phase begins. The melt. All those new dollars dilute every existing dollar. prices start rising fast. Groceries that cost $5 now cost $12, then $20. The store that reopened has half the inventory at triple the price. Your job, if you still have one, pays the same number of dollars that now buys half as much. And this is the part most people have never experienced, so it's hard to imagine. Inflation isn't just things costing more. When it accelerates fast enough, it breaks commerce itself. A fuel supplier quotes a price on Monday. By Wednesday, that price doesn't cover their costs. So, they stop honoring quotes. A trucking company fills their tank Tuesday, but can't price a delivery for Friday because they don't know what fuel will cost by then. Every business in the economy faces the same problem. They can't plan, can't price, can't extend credit, can't trust that the money they receive today will buy what they need tomorrow. The whole web of commercial relationships that keeps everything moving, the payment terms, the credit lines, the contracts that let farmers plant in spring, knowing they'll be paid in fall, all of it dissolves. By month 2, the power starts sputtering. The utility companies can't buy fuel at prices that double every few weeks, with revenue from customers who are increasingly unemployed. Rolling blackouts begin. 4 hours on, 8 off. Your elevator works sometimes. Your refrigerator can't maintain temperature. The food you rationed is spoiling. Now extend this to water. Most municipal water systems require electricity to run pumps. If the water goes out and stays out, the pumps stop. Some systems have backup generators, but those generators run on fuel, and fuel comes through the same disrupted supply chain. Major cities have water pressure for hours, maybe a day or two, once the pumps stop. After that, nothing comes out of the faucet. And one morning, you wake up in a cold apartment, in the dark, with no food, no way to cook what little you have, and the smell of thousands of unflushed toilets seeping through the building, and you realize, I have to leave. But so has everyone else. You step out onto the street, and you see what I saw in Kanagawa in 2011. Hordes of people, walking. Except in Tokyo, they were walking home to check on their families, and they knew help was coming. Here, they're walking away from a city that can no longer sustain them, and they have nowhere to go. You might be thinking, the military will save us. The National Guard will bring food and water. But where does the military get its food? From the same farms and the same trucks that stopped moving when the payment system broke. How do they distribute it? They're a logistic operation that runs on fuel. Fuel that comes through the same disrupted supply chain. They're a machine that runs on the same coordination system as the rest of society. The military can secure critical infrastructure for a time. They can guard power plants and water treatment facilities. But they cannot feed 8 million people in New York City when the supply chain that feeds those people has lost the ability to coordinate. No military on Earth has that capacity on short notice. Do you see the chain? Payment systems fail. Supply chains freeze. Fuel stops moving. Power generation runs down its reserves and goes dark. Water systems lose pressure, and each of these failures make the others worse. You can't restart the payment system without electricity. You can't restore electricity without fuel. You can't move fuel without functioning payments. Everything is still physically there. The infrastructure is intact. The food exists. The fuel exists. The grid exists. What breaks is the coordination, the system of payments and promises that tells every part of the machine what to do and when to do it. Now let's step back and notice the pattern we've been tracking. Why are modern supply chains so fragile? Because every company in the chain optimized for its own efficiency. Keep inventory low, that saves money. Run lean staffing, that saves money. Use just-in-time delivery, that saves money. Each decision made perfect sense for the individual business making it. But collectively, they stripped all of the resilience out of the system. No one kept extra inventory because extra inventory costs money. No one maintained redundant supply routes because redundancy is inefficient. Everyone optimized for their own narrow interest, And the result is a system that works perfectly right up until the moment it doesn't work at all. What about the government? Isn't this exactly what regulators are for? To see the big picture that no individual company can see? Yes, that's the job. And they failed at it. For the same reason everyone else in the story failed. They looked at their own piece, their own career, their own next appointment. The pattern doesn't spare anyone. Not banks, not exchanges, not governments. The pattern. Individual rationality creating collective fragility. The same pattern that built the derivatives bubble. The same pattern that let COMEX promise 4 times more silver than it has. The same pattern that let regulators look the other way. We built a system where everybody is making reasonable decisions for themselves and nobody is looking at the whole picture. So is there a way out? I showed you 4 tools the system uses to manage a crisis like this. Margin hikes, cash settlement, rule changes, and printing money. None of them create a single ounce of silver. They just rearrange who's holding the bag. But there are other possibilities we haven't discussed. Actual exits. The first possibility you might think is the most obvious one. If the governments need silver badly enough, why don't they just seize it from citizens and local coin dealers? They could reprice it overnight to $200 or $500, whatever it takes, and shake most of the bars of silver out of the stores and safes in America. Roosevelt did something similar with gold in 1934. It's been done before. Here's why it doesn't work. Your silver coins and bars are 99.9% purity. 3 nines. That's fine for coins. But the semiconductor industry needs what's called 5 nines. 99.999% purity. Solar panel manufacturers need specialized silver pastes and powders. The silver in your safe and the silver a chip factory needs are not the same product. It's like saying you have plenty of crude oil when what the factory needs is jet fuel. Yes, one can become the other, but not without a refinery. And here's the kill shot. Most of the specialized refining capacity, the facilities that turn bullion into industrial-grade silver paste and powder, was moved to China over the last 15 years. We didn't just lose the silver. We lost the ability to process it into the form industry actually needs. Even if the government seized every ounce of private silver in America tomorrow, they'd still have to send it to China to be refined. Are you seeing the picture now? Everything is about short-term gains. We sold out our future, and the future has arrived. The second possibility is coordinated demand reduction. The logic is simple. If you can't increase the supply, decrease the demand. The government calls manufacturers, solar companies, chip makers, electronic firms, and says, slow your production lines. We'll compensate you. Then the president calls world leaders and delivers the same message. You're in the blast radius too. If we all slow down for 90 days, the delivery pressure eases and we survive to argue another day. The cost would be tens of billions. That's a rounding error. The 2008 bailout was $700 billion, decided in a weekend. COVID was trillions in weeks. But it's too slow for March. Production changes take weeks to flow through supply chains. You can't quietly slow a solar panel factory the way you can quietly adjust margin requirements at midnight. Workers get laid off. Customers notice. Investors ask questions. And the metals community is watching every inventory number, every delivery report. There is no quiet version of this. Could it work for June? For September? Maybe. If we limp through March, through some combination of tools already discussed, this approach could buy 6 months to a year. And honestly, that would be a gift. It would give people time to prepare, time to have the conversation that matters, time to act on what you're learning in this video right now. But does it solve the underlying problem? The physical shortage is still there. We're still consuming hundreds of millions more ounces per year than we mine. And all of the money printing required to keep the system alive during the borrowed time is destroying the value of the dollar. Which means when it finally does collapse, and the math says it will, we'll all be in an even worse position than if it had happened today. Buying time is valuable, but only if you make use of it. Which brings us to the simplest exit of all. One phone call. The President of the United States calls Xi Jinping of China and says, "We have a problem. It's your problem too. Open your silver exports." China can make decisions and implement them with extraordinary speed. Xi Jinping can issue a directive and its policy by morning. The 44 licensed export firms are already identified. The infrastructure already exists. And the metal doesn't even need to arrive on time. The announcement might be enough. Markets trade on expectations. If China credibly signals that silver is flowing again, the psychology of the March delivery period changes instantly. Holders who are demanding delivery because they feared it was their last chance to get metal, they relax. They roll contracts forward. The shorts get breathing room. The COMEX survives not because the atoms arrived, but because the promise became believable again. So why hasn't it happened? It's not clear that the president has realized what's at our doorstep. His information is filtered through advisors, who get their information from the same institutional actors we've been discussing, the ones who only see their own narrow piece. The person with the authority to make the call may not know that a call needs to be made. And on China's side, President Xi closed those exports for a strategic reason. Silver was reclassified as a strategic resource, the same category as rare earths. To reopen, he'd want something big in return. What he'd want and what President Trump would give, that's a negotiation nobody can predict. And it's possible that President Xi blocked silver as a way of destroying Western civilization, so China could be the world's new leading empire. But we must be real here. We must swallow our pride. China doesn't need us as much as we need them. They've spent the last decade building systems that don't depend on us. We need them more than they need us, and they know it. But even if the call happens, even if China opens the exports, even if March is diffused, you've still revealed the problem to the world. They promised to deliver silver and didn't have it, is a sentence anyone can understand. The president had to call China and ask them to send us metal so our banks didn't collapse, is a sentence no one will forget. And the response of every ordinary person who hears that story is exactly what you would expect. They start asking questions. What else are they hiding? Is my bank account real? Is my pension backed by anything? Are the treasury bonds in my retirement fund like the silver contracts? Promises with nothing behind them? Those are rational questions. The answers are uncomfortable. And the system depends on people not asking them. So the rescue itself becomes the trigger. Maybe not immediately. Maybe you buy 3 months, 6 months, possibly a year. Every person who understood what almost happened is quietly moving their wealth out of the system. Physical gold, physical silver, Bitcoin, land, anything that is outside the web of promises. And that withdrawal of trust is itself a slow-motion bank run that eventually produces the crisis the rescue was designed to prevent. Every exit reveals the problem. All paths lead to the same place. The only variable is speed. Now, you might have seen headlines recently about a massive $12 trillion deal between the US and Russia for energy and critical commodities. On the surface, it sounds like the miracle we need. Here's the hard truth. Infrastructure takes years. Silver delivery notices begin February 27th. A handshake doesn't put silver in the vault. That deal does nothing for the immediate problem. So this isn't about whether the system holds or breaks. It's about when. And the only question that actually matters for you right now, today is, what do you do with the time you have left before it arrives? You start thinking, right now, today. Before you do anything, stop and ask yourself one question. Almost everything else depends on your answer. How long can I stay right where I am? Think honestly. If the stores close and don't reopen, if the power becomes intermittent and then stops, if the water pressure drops to nothing, how long is the place you're living in right now survivable? Consider the season you're going into, of course. If it's mid-February and you have a month's worth of supplies, that means you may be out in the cold walking for 100 miles before you get anywhere you might need to go. The cold may well kill you very quickly. But if it's June, that changes the equation, because the weather will likely not kill you. Think it through. See the world through the eyes of nature. Talk about this with friends. If you must move, your preparation is for moving. If you're already where you need to be, like, say, a farm somewhere off-grid with solar power and a good well, you'll probably want to prepare to stay for the long term. For most people in a metropolis apartment, you'll probably be traveling by foot, so you'd need to prepare for travel. I can't tell you what to do because I don't know your situation. Nobody does except you. But I can tell you some key questions that matter. If you're staying, what's your potable water source when the taps stop? How do you cook without electricity? How do you stay warm or cool without the grid? Who are your neighbors, and have you ever had an honest conversation with them about what you'd do if things got hard? How much food do you actually have? Not what you assume, but what you've counted. If you're moving, where are you going? Who will take you in? Have you called them? If you wait too long, the phones may not work. How do you get there without gas? What fits in one bag you can carry for miles? What season is it? And what does that mean for traveling on foot where you live? Sit down tonight and conscientiously answer them. Write the answers down. You'll be shocked by how many you can't answer and how quickly the answers come once you actually look. If you want more specific guidance on preparation, what to store, how much, how to think about water and food and warmth and security in detail, tell me in the comments. I'll make that video. Ask me your specific questions and I'll address them. But right now, the most important thing isn't what's in your bag. It's that you've started looking at your situation with honest eyes. Now here's the most important thing I'm going to say in this entire video. When people are unprepared, when they haven't thought any of this through, when the shelves are empty and their children are hungry and they have nothing, there is tremendous pressure to take from others. That's where a lot of violence comes from. From the panic of a parent who has no food, no plan, and no time. Everything you do now reduces that pressure, for you and for the people around you. Every bag of rice is one less desperate decision someone has to make in the instant. Every neighbor you help think through the situation is one less family in panic when the shelves empty. Every conversation you have this week, hey, if things got bad, what would you do? You are directly reducing the chaos that follows. But don't make the mistake of most preppers who talk and do nothing. Notice what you're doing when you think this way. You're doing the thing that nobody in the entire story did. You're looking at the whole picture, not just your piece, the whole thing. You're asking not just, what do I need, but what do the people around me need? And how does my preparation fit into that? That is exactly the opposite of the pattern that built the very failure I showed you in this video. Every link in the chain, the derivatives bubble, the empty promises on the COMEX, the stripped-down supply chains, the regulators who looked away, every one was built by someone solving their own problem without looking at what it meant for everyone else. That habit is a disease, and the cure is exactly what you're doing right now, thinking about your situation honestly, seeing how it connects to the people around you, and acting with the whole picture in mind. If you can, help the people around you do the same. Ask them the questions you asked yourself. If things broke down, how long could you stay where you are? Most people have never thought about this, and they will be better off for having looked. That's how you break the cycle, not with better regulations or a different president. If the people who built these systems are still in the habit of solving for themselves and ignoring everyone else, the cycle repeats. The cure is people who see the whole picture and act on what they see. Now, one more thing. The question is what happens after. Think of it this way. For eons, ancient humans didn't know how to start fire. They could carry it. They could feed it. They could share it between camps. But if the ember went out, they were in the cold and the dark until they found another ember, from another tribe or from a forest fire they didn't control. Industrial civilization is our fire. We can tend it, we can use it, but we cannot restart it alone. Every piece depends on every other piece already working. The grid needs fuel. The fuel needs trucks. The trucks need roads and payments. The payments need banks. The banks need a currency. And ours just burned. If our fire goes out, we'll need someone else's ember. That's where China and Russia re-enter the picture. A largely depopulated West still has farmland, ports, mineral rights, infrastructure, and technology. They will want it. But infrastructure without electricity is just architecture. Technology without a grid is just dead metal. To bring any of it back, you need someone to show up with functioning money, fuel, generators, engineers, and the logistical capacity to rebuild across a continent. You need someone who still has a working industrial economy to restart the fire. There are exactly 2 nations on Earth positioned to do that, and they're the ones who spent the last decade making sure they wouldn't need us when this happened. They won't need to invade. They'll arrive with functioning money and functioning systems, and they'll buy what's left. And we'll welcome them, because the alternative is staying in the dark. This is the same playbook the West used on the developing world for 50 years. What goes around comes around. But China and Russia suffer from the very same disease that caused our collapse, the habit of optimizing for themselves without seeing the whole picture. Their time will come. So did China do this on purpose? As a strategist, I have to say, probably. And we can see their thinking in their own words and actions going back decades. In 1989, the man who built modern China, Deng Xiaoping, gave the government a set of instructions that became their guiding philosophy for the next 23 years. He told them, observe carefully, secure our position, hide our capabilities, and bide our time. Never claim leadership. For over 2 decades, that's exactly what they did. They built quietly. They grew their economy. They studied us. And they waited. That philosophy was drawn directly from Sun Tzu's Art of War, a book Chinese strategists have studied for over 2,000 years. Then, in 2012, a new leader took over, Xi Jinping, and the tone shifted. By 2017, Xi was telling his officials that the world was entering what he called great changes unseen in a century. By 2020, in a closed-door Communist Party meeting, he went further. A regional official quoted him in a speech that was briefly posted online before being scrubbed. Here's what Xi told his inner circle. The East is rising and the West is declining. He called America the biggest source of chaos in the present-day world and the biggest threat to our country's development and security. And he said to his own people, behind closed doors, time and momentum are on our side. Those are his words on record in 2020, 5 years before silver restriction. And then, in August of 2021, the whole world watched the United States withdraw from Afghanistan. After 20 years, $2 trillion, and thousands of lives in what can only be described as a catastrophe. Everyone saw those images. Everyone drew their own conclusions. And you can be certain that the strategists in Beijing were watching too. Now look at what China did in the 5 years that followed. They bought gold, thousands of tons of it. They built their own international payment system, their version of the network that moves money between banks worldwide, so they could process trillions in trade without needing ours. They signed currency agreements with roughly 50 countries, so those nations could trade directly in Chinese yuan instead of US dollars. They sold over $627 billion in U.S. Treasury bonds, our debt, with $71 billion sold in just the last 12 months. They began buying oil from Russia and paying for it in their own currency, not ours. Step by step, they were building a world that didn't need the dollar. And we didn't notice, because each step on its own didn't look like much. Then, on January 1st, 2026, they reclassified silver as a strategic resource and restricted its export. Other countries were shut out. 29 days later, silver hit $121, and the cracks appeared. And the very next day, January 31st, while our markets were in freefall, while silver was crashing from $121 to $75, while our financial press was scrambling to explain the chaos, Beijing published a declaration from Xi Jinping in their most important political journal. His words, "What constitutes a strong financial nation? First, it should have a powerful currency, widely used international trade, investment, and foreign exchange markets, holding the status of a global reserve currency." He was describing the dollar, and he was saying, that's going to be us. They published a blueprint for replacing our currency on the day our currency-based system cracked. Coincidence? Sun Tzu wrote over 2,000 years ago, "Supreme excellence consists of breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting, and the opportunity of defeating the enemy is provided by the enemy himself." China spent 30 years hiding their strength and biding their time. They spent 5 years watching us promise 4 times more silver than we had. They watched us strip the resilience out of every system we depend upon. And then they cut us off, which is completely their right, and let gravity do the rest. I'll leave it to you to decide whether this was intentional. But at this point, it doesn't really matter. There's not much we can do about it. What we can do, the only move left on the board, is to help our neighbors help their neighbors. And that's the only move that's ever going to matter anyway. You still have a bit of time if you start taking action today. One more thing. I've painted a dark picture today because the picture is dark. But there's still hope. There may be no way to stop the banking collapse. But there may be a way to keep the electricity on, keep the water running, and keep civilization intact even if the banks fail. It's not a new idea. It's one of the oldest ideas in human history. And it's something we can demand, together, starting right now. I'm working on that video. It's going to take a lot of research and time. I'm hoping it will be out by early next week. If you want to see it, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss it. And share this video with everyone you care about, because the more people who understand what's happening, the more power we have to shape what comes next. I'll see you soon.